Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For a financial services supervisor, an on-site visit to a firm is a good opportunity to observe its business culture. We are not quite uninvited guests, but when you do receive notice that we want to come and see you, we are rather like that formidable relative whom you can't say no to when they announce that they're going to come and stay. So for this year's presentation, we decided to apply the theme for the industry seminar of the interaction of business culture with regulation, literally. Now, the meaning of this slide will hopefully become apparent in a little while, but as Catherine said, please listen up as we are going to share with you our experiences of the business cultures we see in firms we visit. Now, our session would not be complete if we did not mention Moneyval or the National Risk Assessment, so I also cover our engagement experience in those areas. Now, I've been a supervisor for 17 years, and during that period, I've had the privilege to go out on site and sit in the heart of your organisations for up to a week at a time, meeting your staff, discussing your business, and reviewing materials such as business risk assessments, board minutes, and client files. Almost invariably, I'm struck by how hospitable and helpful firms are, which lends support to the Commission's view that most businesses are well organised and have an inclusive and supportive business environment within which staff can develop and clients prosper. Now, that good welcome includes firms who identify to us a go-to person within their teams who will help locate documents we might need during the on-site, copy papers, and arrange for us to meet the people who can answer the inevitable questions that arise. Now, we've had some excellent help from IT staff who set us up with access to your document management systems, help us navigate the electronic filing systems, and who, with good humour, help the less tech-savvy in our team, myself included, when we have pressed the wrong button. We even have people poking their head around the door of our temporary office in your premises to let us know that the sandwich van has arrived in case we forgot to bring our lunch. Now, in return, we do our utmost to explain the purpose of our visit, which at its core is quite simply an assessment of how robust your controls are for managing the risks within the type of business that you are and the client relationships that you have. We are also keen to ensure that firms understand each step of the on-site process and the opportunities that are available within that framework for the firm to show to us how robust its measures are. Now, we appreciate that people might be nervous when they meet us. We do have a pretty good grasp of current practices from visiting up to 50 firms a year, but we cannot second-guess what we do not know. So, for example, if compliance matters are discussed in senior management forums other than board meetings, please let us know, because it can sometimes feel when meeting your teams like a trip to the dentist. Now, I know there's a popular image of us with jackboots and combats, but I can assure you that we have not come along to pull your teeth. Now, unfortunately, once in a while, we encounter a rather different environment. For my part, I've sat before a male director of a firm who would very pointedly ignore the women on the team and only look at and discuss matters about the firm with the men from the Commission. I've been on a visit where the on-site team have been left to find their own way out of the building when the fire alarm went off and the fire engines arrived. Thank you. No one had told us where the fire exits were or came to get us to show us the way out. Now, I don't know if it was a tactic to defer our on-site visit by attempting arson, but clearly we made it out the building okay to go back to the firm another day. Now, I've given you a couple of my own vignettes, which raised for me questions about the firm's priorities, its attitude towards its staff, and how well organised it was. But my team also wanted to share their experience of poor culture and business practices identified from some of our recent on-sites. So before I cover some other areas of interaction, such as Moneyval and National Risk Assessment, I'm going to hand you over to Nick to take you through our on-site findings.
Good morning. Today I would like to set out some examples of good and poor compliance culture which we have seen from our engagement with firms during the last 12 months. Understanding your risk appetite is key. We have noted from our engagement with firms that those firms who can clearly articulate their risk appetite are also the same firms which put in place strong policies, procedures and controls to mitigate the risks of money laundering and terrorist financing. This is why the Commission has placed great emphasis on a firm's business risk assessment and the articulation of its risk appetite. The Commission does not take issue with firms administering high-risk business, so long as they put in place the appropriate controls to mitigate the risks. When undertaking an on-site visit to a firm, a large proportion of the visit is devoted to understanding a firm's risk appetite and assessing what type of business a firm would be willing to accept. We also assess whether the evidence found on the client files aligns with the board's perception of its risk appetite. Where there is a disconnect between what the board believes and what the business actually does, will invariably lead to enhanced supervision by the Financial Crime Division or referral to the Commission's Enforcement Division for further investigation. As Fiona stated earlier, the Financial Crime Division endeavours to engage with up to 50 firms per year, and the large majority of these firms have demonstrated a good compliance culture. For example, we visited a firm that identified in its business risk appetite that a large proportion of its clients were high risk. As a result, the firm has a rigorous enhanced CDD onboarding procedure. The firm informs potential high-risk clients that they will conduct enhanced CDD, and this may take time. They also inform potential clients that they will be charged for the enhanced CDD, and this differs to many firms who charge a fixed rate plus time spent. The issue with charging on a time spent basis is that on the less active clients, there can be less incentive to do compliance, notwithstanding that these less active clients can still be high risk. Charging a specific fee for enhanced CDD means that the firm is able to conduct detailed due diligence rather than the bare minimum seen with set fees. This firm demonstrated that it was prepared to go through extra lengths to understand their clients and their source of wealth, even on the less active clients. The firm also advised us that their clients did not mind paying for this extra fee because they considered they received a better service. And in one case, a very sophisticated fraud was stopped because the firm knew their clients so well. Whilst it's not for the Commission to direct firms on how to run their businesses, we consider that this is an excellent example of good practice in relation to the management of high-risk relationships. Equally, we have visited a number of firms that have a low risk appetite and have clearly demonstrated that they are just not willing to accept high-risk business. And here are a couple of examples. One firm was approached by an individual who wished to set up a trust structure. The individual wanted to use a number of companies with activities in the West African oil and gas industry. However, the purpose, complexity, and rationale for the structure was not clear to the firm. Furthermore, the individual was evasive with information and did not want to provide personal data which was necessary for the firm to conduct CDD. The firm was also unable to ascertain the source of wealth. As a result, the firm declined the business. It's evident that this firm was clearly alive to the risks of bribery and corruption posed by this potential client. Another firm was introduced to a client by a firm in relation to the financing of an airport. However, the CDD was provided in small amounts, and the firm spent a lot of time attempting to piece together a clear explanation for the confusing structure and funding and ownership. The board of the firm decided that the high level of enhanced due diligence and resources required to conduct this did not fit within the firm's risk appetite. Accordingly, this firm declined the business and logged this information in their declined business register. It's clear that this firm was concerned that this client could subject to tax evasion, bribery, and corruption risks. What's also apparent from these two examples is that both of these firms declined the potential business because they could not understand the economic or commercial rationale, and ultimately, these clients did not fit within their risk appetite. Ongoing monitoring of business relationships, in particular transactions and adverse media screening, is one of the most important aspects of effective ongoing CDD. It's encouraging that the majority of boards have a demonstrable awareness of financial crime risks and are supportive of strong preventative measures. For example, one firm identified that the traditional method of monitoring transactions was not sufficiently robust to monitor the potential money laundering and terrorist financing risks that the firm was exposed to. Previously, the firm's system flagged frequent transactions over £10,000, which is a commonly used threshold. However, this would enable an individual to send £9,999 whilst remaining under the radar. Furthermore, some firms only monitor large transactions each month, enabling an individual to smurf 10,000 on the 31st and 10,000 on the 1st of the following month. However, this firm recognised these weaknesses in its business risk assessment and created an average of transactions to determine any anomalies. Okay, so firms often ask us for examples of poor practice, and we could think of no better way of relaying these to you other than my colleagues and I performing a role play. Today we have for you a 20-minute video divided into 3 scenes. The first scene is the opening meeting between the Commission's supervisors and the management team of a fictitious firm called Salary Financial Services. The second scene shows the supervisors discussing the results of their client file reviews amongst themselves. And the final scene is when the supervisors discuss their initial concerns with the firm's management team. The issues raised in this case study are real. References to brown paper bags filled with cash and arms trading are true, but anonymised. And I'm glad to say that not all the issues raised in this video belong to one single firm. Now, while some of the acting is somewhat exaggerated for entertainment purposes, I hope you find the key messages useful. Thank you.
The financial crime team from the Commission have just arrived at the firm's offices to begin their on-site visit. They are meeting with the board to discuss at a high level the firm's business, its corporate governance arrangements, business risk assessment, risk appetite, and general AML CFT controls. Tonya is leading the visit. Joining her is Wade and Douglas. Let's see how they get on.
Good morning, and thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. My name is Tonya, and my colleagues, Wade and Douglas, we're from the financial crime team. And Douglas and Wade will interject with queries during the visit.
And I'll be taking a note of the minutes, so if you could kindly tell us your names for the record, please.
Yeah, sure. My name's Nick. I'm the Managing Director of Salary Financial Services.
I'm Andrew, and I'm the Chairman.
Hi, my name's Paul. I'm the MLRO, Company Secretary and Client Services Team B Team Leader.
Okay, Paul, that sounds like quite a few hats you're wearing. How do you manage the conflicts and the time pressures with those roles effectively?
Yeah, well, I have a great team who provide me with plenty of support when I need it.
Okay, well, that sounds promising. Like I said, we're from the financial crime team, and therefore the focus of the visit is your firm's AML CFT controls.
CFT? CFT? Should I know what that means?
Countering the financing of terrorism, Andy.
Oh, yeah. Well, we do lots of that around here.
Well, that's good to know.
Well, can we just start by talking about the firm's risk appetite? What would you say your risk appetite is?
Yeah, sure. We have a low risk appetite.
Yeah, low risk.
Yeah, definitely no.
Low risk, okay. Well, that's quite curious because your latest financial crime risk return says you've got 54% of your clients rated as high risk. How would you say that fits with a low risk appetite?
Well, clearly we have a high risk clients, but it just feels like a low risk type of business. We have robust policies, procedures and controls in place, and I make sure that the board reviews the business risk assessment annually and pays it the appropriate attention it deserves.
Yeah, and on that point, we have a compliance monitoring program which we review on an annual basis, and it actually has 18 different tests looking at our AML CFT controls.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I would just like to clarify that the Commission is not against firms having high-risk business. I mean, we just need to understand that firms have appropriate policies, procedures and controls to mitigate the risks of those clients. And I mean, we have seen quite a few firms in the bailiwick with those controls.
Well, that's really good to hear, and I'm sure that we'll fall into that category.
So moving on, we note that during our last visit to your firm, we identified a number of issues with corporate governance culture, and also AML controls on client transaction requests. Those issues became RMPs. So all I want to know is an update on those mitigation programs.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's say the majority of the issues stem from our previous managing director, Mr. Rasputin. Let's just say some of the junior staff were pushed into certain transactions that maybe they shouldn't have done. But the whole vibe of the company's completely changed.
Much better.
Yeah, and if I could add, obviously we had some RMPs in place, but we've complied with all of your colleagues' requests, and we've had them all closed off, and we actually had a letter kind of formally concluding the visit recently.
Yeah, and on top of that, we've just had a final report. We had an external auditor, cost a fortune, mind you, to come in and review our policies and procedures, and but at least the feedback's been pretty good from that.
Well, that does sound positive. Is it possible to have a copy of that audit report, please?
For you, Tanya, of course.
Thank you.
Okay, can we start with a few more questions on your AML CFT controls? What would you say the three greatest AML CFT risks are that your business faces?
Money laundering, terrorist financing and bribery and corruption, would you say, Andy?
Yeah.
Okay, they're quite general topics. How would they specifically affect your business and your firm and your clients?
Yeah, I mean, if I can jump in, clearly we take the risks of money laundering very seriously. We have an AML procedures manual in place, and we review that annually. We have training that we give to our employees on an annual basis.
Here the firm has not adequately responded to key questions surrounding its risk appetite and business risk assessment. In order to meet the requirements of the rules and regulations, it is expected that the firm is familiar with its own policies, procedures and controls, as well as having a sufficient understanding of the potential risks its business may face. Furthermore, there may be issues regarding Paul's role as the MLRO, company secretary and client services team leader. The commission team members are in a room set aside by the firm to review client files. They typically look at a sample of files, spread of risk ratings and client activities. The team will discuss anything that they find unusual or confusing on the files amongst themselves as a sense check before seeking clarification from the firm. Let's see how they are getting on with their reviews. I wonder if they found anything concerning.
This is an interesting one.
Oh, yeah.
There's this client and he has two passports, one from Bolivia and one from New Zealand, but they have different names on them.
Oh, can I have a look?
Yeah, of course.
Have you seen these photos? He's had some work done.
Yeah.
He looks 10 years younger than the second one. It was made 5 years after the first one.
Why would he do that?
Well, that's what I'll have to find out. And there's also a few emails here, a few strange emails. The client is asking the firm to refer to him only from the name on his Bolivian passport. And there's also some emails where he's asking the firm whether there's been any recent transactions that were above $10,000. It just sounds like an interesting combination of requests.
Yeah. Do you think he's maybe trying to avoid the attentions of the taxman?
Well, $10,000 is a common reporting threshold, so I think we'll just have to ask a few more questions about that. And also, I've noticed that the last 3 years' risk reviews are also late.
Oh, right. The risk reviews are late on this one too. This one's got an interesting little note. It looks like the firm are trying to open a new bank account for this client. And the bank sent a questionnaire that they want the client to fill out. And the client's flicked it to his lawyer, and the lawyer seems less than impressed. The lawyer's saying, Who needs the additional information, you or the bank? If it's the bank, why don't you use a different bank? Do you need help locating a different bank?
Sounds like they need a new lawyer to me. Anyway, on this file, I've got a number of personal due diligence questionnaires that have been completed on the directors of the company. One of them is listed as having a career as a caretaker for a school.
A caretaker? What? As in a janitor? What are those skills going to bring to the board?
Well, this is my point, really. It could be that they're a nominee director, so I think we need to ask some questions. There's also the additional fact that they're late by 2 years for their risk review, so another one.
More overdue reviews. This one's strange. There's a file note on here saying the firm received their fees in cash from the client's taxi driver. He handed over the cash in a brown paper bag, and they've made a note of that, but I can't see anything on there about the CDD on him at all.
Mamma mia.
Yeah, here we go again. There's no link on the file between the client or the taxi driver, or why the taxi driver's paying. Why isn't the client using their own bank account to pay their fees?
Well, this guy here, we've got an African pet. They've done risk reviews. They've rated him as high risk. There's just a couple of questions around his source of wealth. It's listed as a number of properties around Kinshasa, and I can't see anything else. So I think I'm going to have to ask a few more questions about that.
Oh, I think you need to add that one to the list as well, Douglas. Well, my last file here is linked to mining investments in West Africa.
Ah, yes. Well, West Africa. I've seen some good business coming from there. It's just really a question of understanding, knowing who your clients are. So just be careful, really.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point, but I'm not too sure about this guy, and I'm not sure about the firm's controls over this relationship. I mean, there's a file note here from the MLRO about one of the shareholders, Mr. T, and it looks like he became involved with the company about 6 months ago. But only a couple of months ago, the firm actually noticed it. So the MLRO has done some research, which is good. But it looks like he has suspected links to arms trading in West Africa.
Arms trading? Let me check. It's Mr. T.
Yeah.
So the A-team have gone rogue in West Africa.
Yeah,
Right.
well.
Doesn't match with the low risk appetite, does it? Does it?
Well, it looks like the MLRO assessed the research that you conducted on this guy, and he compiled a file note. So listen up. I do not believe that this sort of business fits within our risk appetite, and I believe that being involved with this individual could lead to reputational risk for the bailiwick. The GFSC would not be happy. But despite the red flags, the firm still carried on with the relationship.
Well, doesn't the MLRO have a veto power?
Well, it doesn't look like it, and it doesn't even look like the firm are giving much consideration to the MLRO's opinions. And also, on this one as well, the risk reviews have been late for the last few years as well.
I think we're seeing a pattern here. From what we've seen from the files, they are running late on risk reviews, so I think we'll need to understand why they are late and what's going on there. And whilst we're at it, can I just check with you both, what do you think about the board's assertion that it's a low risk appetite for the firm?
So what, they've got clients involved in mining in West Africa who may or may not be involved in the arms trade, and they've got African peps with holding property as source of wealth. I would say no, it's not a low risk appetite. What do you think, Tonya?
I don't think it's low.
I've got to say I tend to agree with both of you there. I don't think it's a low risk appetite. What we'll have to do is just get some questions. Well, we've got a meeting coming up with the administrator, so we'll see if we can get some answers to questions there. And we'll take it from that point on, I guess.
Okay.
Well, that was insightful. However, there are plenty of questions that have not been sufficiently answered, and there appear to be more questions to be followed up with on regard to the completion of the risk reviews. The team will need to take this up with the firm before they can make a final assessment. The information on the file reviews prompted the team to meet with the client relationship managers responsible for the files reviewed. Following up from this, the on-site team are meeting with the directors of the firm to discuss their concerns further.
Okay, so we've had a look through the files that you provided to us, and we have some follow-up questions on some information that we couldn't find on file. But I mean, it could be that it's just us not knowing our way around the system.
Probably, but please carry on.
Okay, so can we firstly talk about your AML risk reviews and the outstanding action points that derive from those reviews. Now, we noticed from the file reviews that there was quite a high number of risk reviews that were 12 to 24 months overdue. So would you be able to just explain to me your plan to address these?
Paul, I think you're best to take this.
Sure, yeah. Well, admittedly, we have fallen behind a little with our reviews. However, this was picked up by our CMP and we are addressing it. You may have noticed we've got a contractor in now who's going to help us through these.
Okay, do you know why they fell behind?
Well, when Mr. Rasputin left, he took a number of employees with him, and there have also been some high-risk projects like FATCA and CRS reporting, and sadly something had to give, so it was the risk reviews that were put to one side.
Okay, I see.
Just asking a further question on that point. We have seen from the files that the reviews have been carried out, but from these reviews we've seen a number of action points are outstanding. I think there's been a total I've seen of around about 500 outstanding action points. Why are there so many?
I think it's likely to be down to the contractor's knowledge of the clients rather than the clients themselves.
Okay. And do you have a plan of how you're going to work on these action points?
Well, I guess we'll just have to work harder and get them done as quick as possible.
Okay. Well, I'd appreciate if you could keep us informed of progress towards that end.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I could start with one of the questions from my file review. It appears, I've got a question around the receipt of your firm's management fees, and it appears that you received the fees from a taxi driver in cash. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Did that raise any concerns with you at all?
Well, I've got to admit it's a little bit unusual, but at the end of the day, it was the right amount. He handed it over. You know, we made a record of it just to confirm that that's what happened, but otherwise, you know, what's your problem?
Well, I can see that you've documented receipt of the cash, but I can't see any consideration of any AML risk associated with receiving cash in this matter. For example, what would your firm's bribery and corruption policy say?
Paul?
I don't know, I'm afraid. I'll have to look into that for you. It was before my time.
Okay, well, if we can liaise with that going forward, that'd be great.
Sure.
Okay, Paul, if I can carry on with you as well, please. I noticed from my client file here that you completed a file note with regard to a shareholder, Mr. T.
Oh, yes.
So I see that in the note you're recommending exiting the relationship because you think that the individual is exposing the firm and the bailiwick to reputational risk. And it states that despite your recommendations, the board still carried on with that relationship. So I just wanted to know, as MLRO, do you have a right of veto?
Well, on new business, yes. But as this is existing business...
I'll take it from here. Tonya, we take the recommendations of the MLO very seriously, but ultimately it's the board's decision whether to maintain a client relationship. And although Paul's points were pertinent, upon further investigation, we decided to maintain the relationship.
Okay, I see that you've done further investigation. I mean, I couldn't see it on file, so is it possible to have a copy of that information?
Yeah, I've got it in my office. You can have it, Tonya.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving on. I have the client file here, and the client has two passports, one from Bolivia and one from New Zealand, with two different names on it. I mean, it just sounds a bit unusual to me. Can you just give me a rationale for that?
Well, you'll have to ask him that.
Can I just clarify, because you are the administrators of this company, it is your responsibility to research any unusual behaviour?
Yes, of course, but to be honest, he's a bit of an eccentric. And he's going through a messy divorce, and he just doesn't want his wife to get hold of his assets.
Okay, but I have noticed also some emails where he's asking you to refer to him only by the name on his Bolivian passport. And it also looks like he's quite keen on keeping transactions below $10,000 US. Has this behaviour raised any concerns with you?
Look, Tonya, it's really quite simple. He's just a man trying to get on and start a new life, yeah? He's turning over a new leaf. What's wrong with that?
Well, we'll talk about this particular case a little bit later. So, Douglas, I don't know if you have any questions?
Thank you, Tonya. I've got a question on this file for Andrew. Here I've been looking at a number of personal due diligence questionnaires that have been completed for the directors of the companies, one of which has his career listed down as caretaker for a school.
Can I have a look at that?
Yes, certainly.
Yes, that does appear to be correct.
Well, could you explain that to me?
Well, if you look a bit further down, you'll see that he was removed as a director over a year ago. So,
Right. And do you know whether or not he's a director of any other companies?
well, I think he's a director of another two, but, well, we can arrange for him to be removed, can't we?
If that's what they want.
On this file, I'm looking at an African PEP. He's the UBO of this company. It is rated as high risk. Reviews have been done, but I've got some questions over the source of wealth. It's got listed that he owns a number of properties in Kinshasa. Could you explain a bit more about that for me?
Which client? Is that Mufasa?
Yes.
Well, I personally visited the client and he showed me around the properties.
Can you explain to me what you mean by showed you?
Well, we walked around the capital and he went, that's my building and that's my building.
Right, so he didn't provide you with any documentation showing ownership of the properties?
No, he doesn't need to because I trust the guy. I've spent the night at his house, I've had dinner with his family. There's no issue there. I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know what I'm doing.
What more do they want?
I'm not disputing that you trust this individual personally. What I am questioning is documentation to verify a high-risk individual. That's what we would expect.
Look, I know Mufasa, okay?
Okay, well, I haven't got any further questions, so Wade, do you have anything?
Nothing more from my file reviews, but we have written our file review questions down. If you could have a look, read through them and send some answers back, and if you have any supporting documentation, we'd appreciate that as well. But just to finish, did you have any questions of us before we...
Not for me, thanks.
No, nothing from me.
Just one. Who do you expect us to reply to these questions to?
You can use me as your primary contact.
Oh, that's good. Tonya, do you have your business card?
Yes, I do.
Thanks very much. Does it have your personal number on it?
As we can see, the on-site team felt the visit concluded differently to their initial expectations. The board advised the Commission in the opening meeting that their business had a low risk appetite. However, it became apparent from the meetings, file reviews and discussions that the firm's risk appetite is far from low. The firm did not adequately demonstrate that they have the appropriate policies, procedures and controls in place to mitigate the risks of terrorist financing and money laundering.
Now, that was entirely scripted by the team, and I'm sure they'll be absolutely delighted to hear that you enjoyed it. I'd also add there wasn't a glimpse of camouflage in sight. Now, clearly, we weren't going to miss a good opportunity like today to cover some key regulatory messages around risk management, monitoring, and source of wealth. But I'm not going to labour the messages, as I think our case study did that. But what I hope it has shown is why, on occasion, we have to refer a firm to the Enforcement Division for further investigation. Now, a key message we have sought to give over this year at various fora is that proportionally, it is still a very small number of cases where the findings are so poor that we have to refer a firm to enforcement. Now, our case study contained a lot of material, which, whilst not drawn from one firm, the worst of it came from just 5 firms from 2 years' worth of on-site visits. This still represents a very small number of firms with whom we engage, and it remains consistent with our experience of on-site visits generally and from working with firms on other areas that their corporate culture is good, and in particular, the willingness to engage. Now, a good example of this engagement can be found within the bailiwick's efforts to secure a successful outcome to the Moneyval evaluation, the report of which was published in January. Firms and professional organisations who met the assessors had clearly worked very hard to ensure that the assessors understood that the industry took its AML and CFT obligations seriously. Moneyval's recommendations are now being considered within the revision to the AML CFT handbook, which we plan to consult on in Q1 next year. Now, this willingness to engage was also evident among the 60 firms taking part in the bailiwick-wide national risk assessment to identify the bailiwick's money laundering and terrorist financing threats and vulnerabilities. We called each of these firms in advance of the commencement of this project in July to ask them to take part, and the vast majority were pleased to have the opportunity to do so. Now, they are presently completing a second survey, which is asking for their views on the money laundering and terrorist financing risks in their sectors and the effectiveness of firms' controls to manage those risks. Now, we will have to wait until about this time next year for this states-led project to conclude. But those firms will be making no small contribution to the bailiwick's collective understanding of its money laundering and terrorist financing risks. We also find this culture of engagement in other areas of supervision. We had a 98% return rate in the first year of the financial crime risk return, and a 100% return rate for the surveys which form part of our themed on-site work, such as our current project in conjunction with the Investment Division on compliance and risk management frameworks in the fund administration sector. We were also pleased to receive feedback from several firms of the good use they had made of the findings from our thematic review on financial crime training practices across the various sectors. Now, as I draw to a close, I'm delighted that you enjoyed our case studies, because William keeps telling me to liven up AML-CFT messages. But humour aside, I hope that what we have shown from our on-site visits sheds light on the seriousness of the financial crime issues behind the cases which the Commission enforces. I would also like to repeat the words of our chairman from his speech yesterday. Please don't become a case study. So thank you for listening, and as we have some minutes left over, there are roving mics around if you have any questions.